Welcome, everyone, to a story that will make you think twice about taking the elevator alone at night. This is the tale of the Phantom Floor, a place that exists only when it wants to be found. Arif had just started his first semester at a university renowned for its grand, historic architecture. The campus was beautiful, but the dorm he was assigned to was one of the oldest buildings, a relic from colonial times. You know the type. Narrow, winding corridors, staircases that groaned with every step, and thick walls that seemed to absorb every sound, creating an unnerving silence. Of course, a building that old comes with its own collection of ghost stories. Students would whisper tales in hushed tones. Lights that flickered on in empty rooms, the sound of footsteps echoing down deserted halls, and the most persistent rumor of all. A floor that wasn't on any official map. Arif, being a practical guy, dismissed it all as college folklore. The university map clearly showed 4 floors, and his room was on the 3rd. Everything seemed perfectly normal. That is, until one fateful night. Arif was heading back from the library, his mind buzzing after a marathon study session. The lobby was eerily silent, the overhead lights casting long, dancing shadows. He called the elevator. The old rickety metal box that was a campus legend in its own right. He stepped inside, expecting the usual slow, grinding journey upwards. But this ride was different. As the elevator creaked its way up, it shuddered to a violent halt somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd floors. The lights inside flickered erratically, and a low, strange hum vibrated through the floor. Arif's eyes were glued to the digital display. It blinked, glitched, and then settled on a number he'd never seen before. 312. Before he could even process what was happening, the doors groaned open. He wasn't on the 3rd floor. He was somewhere else entirely. The hallway before him was dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of dust and decay. A rusted metal sign on the wall read, Floor 3, East Wing, renovation in progress. But that was impossible. Arif knew his building's layout like the back of his hand. There was no east wing. His curiosity got the better of his fear. He cautiously stepped out of the elevator, and the moment his feet touched the dusty floor, the doors slid shut behind him with a deafening, hollow clang. The hallway seemed to stretch into infinity, far longer than the building should have allowed. Peeling, faded wallpaper clung to the walls, and a series of weak yellow bulbs buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow. The hallway was lined with closed wooden doors, each bearing a faded, old-fashioned number. 301, 303, 305. But the numbering was strange, skipping from 309 straight to 300. There was no room 311. And room 313? It immediately stood out. Its door looked newer, almost out of place. The wood seemed damp, and its silver doorknob had a faint, sinister gleam. As Arif reached out to touch it, the air grew instantly colder. The doorknob was like a block of ice against his skin. At that exact moment, all the hallway lights flickered in unison. Then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound from inside the room. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate, like fingernails drumming against a window pane. A chill shot down his spine. He had to get out of there. He spun around, ready to run back to the elevator, but it was gone. The hallway had changed. It now stretched endlessly in both directions, a repeating corridor of identical doors. And every single door now bore the same number, 313. Panic began to constrict his chest. He was trapped. He picked a door at random, shoved it open, and stumbled into pitch darkness. The only light was a thin sliver from the hallway. His eyes adjusted to reveal what looked like an abandoned dorm room. Old beds with sagging, rotten mattresses, broken chairs, and paint peeling from the walls in long strips. But at the far end of the room, something held his gaze. A tall, cracked mirror. He felt an inexplicable pull towards it. As he drew closer, the temperature plummeted. He stared at his own reflection, his face pale with fear. But he wasn't alone in the mirror. Standing just behind his reflection was a tall, thin figure, hunched over slightly, with limbs that were unnaturally long and slender. Its head tilted slowly, as if it were studying him with an unnerving curiosity. Then it raised a long bony hand and began to tap on the inside of the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Arif whirled around, his heart pounding against his ribs. The room was empty. There was nothing there. He shakily looked back at the mirror. The figure was closer now, directly behind his reflection, its face just inches from his own. The lights in the hallway began to flicker violently. For a split second, the room was plunged into total darkness. And in that moment of blackness, the figure stepped out of the mirror. Its unnaturally long arm stretched out, reaching for him. Arif didn't scream. He didn't even think. He just ran. He burst back into the hallway, which had transformed again. The doors were shifting, their numbers melting and morphing like liquid ink. The walls themselves seemed to groan, and the sound of distant footsteps began to echo, growing louder and more frantic with every second. He sprinted blindly down the impossible, endless corridor. Every door he passed read 313. Just as his lungs started to burn and his legs screamed in protest, he saw it. A faint red exit sign glowing at the far end of the hall. It was his only hope. He poured every last ounce of his energy into reaching it, burst through the door, and suddenly found himself standing back inside the elevator. The panel display showed the number 3. The strange hum was gone. The doors slid shut, then opened moments later onto the familiar ground floor lobby. The night guard, who was dozing in his chair, jumped, startled. He stared at Arif, his eyes wide. He told Arif that the elevator had been shut down for maintenance all night. There was no way he could have been on it. Arif didn't sleep that night, or for many nights after. The next day, he went looking for floor 312. He climbed the stairs, counting every landing, checking every corner. There was no hidden floor between 3 and 4. No abandoned east wing. No room 313. When he asked other students about it, most of them just laughed. But a few older students exchanged nervous glances and warned him to never, ever take that elevator alone after dark. Later, an old janitor who had worked at the university for decades pulled him aside. He spoke in a low whisper, telling Arif that there used to be an east wing on the 3rd floor. It had been destroyed in a terrible fire back in the 1970s and was sealed off permanently. But sometimes, the janitor muttered, his eyes dark with a knowledge Arif didn't want to understand, the elevator forgets. Arif moved to a different dorm at the end of the semester. He tried to put the experience behind him, to convince himself it was just a nightmare brought on by stress and exhaustion. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the campus is silent and he's all alone in his new room, he hears it again. A faint, rhythmic sound, seeming to come from his own bathroom mirror. Tap. 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 Thanks for watching. If this story sent a shiver down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe, and maybe take the stairs next time.